So it's been a crazy couple of days for Bungie. We just had a second round of layoffs at the company since Sony took over. 220 people have lost their jobs, with some of them only even finding out that they were fired when Bungie publicly tweeted about it. A further 155 people are also set to be integrated elsewhere into Sony. Meanwhile, the CEO has apparently spent about $2 million bidding on classic cars. So, since the initial blog post that came out from Bungie announcing these layoffs, as well as the structural changes that's happening in the company, we've had some more information come out from Jeff Grubb, and now Jason Schrier has come out with an article that explains just how bad things are. What a mess. Um, I've been a huge fan of Bungie for years and years. I've grown up with their games, and what's happening now is just really sad, quite frankly. Um, the final shape really rekindled my interest in Destiny. It brought me back to the franchise, but honestly, it now looks like Destiny is about to effectively go on to life support for the foreseeable future. With the plans for future content for the franchise, at least according to what Grubb and Schreier have been saying. Um, and quite frankly, I think I'm done with the series personally. So let's recap essentially what's been going on with Bungie over these last few days. So as I said, 220 people have been let go from Bungie. This is in addition to the 100 or so people laid off in the initial layoffs that happened after Sony took over, which I think was last October. 155 people are moving across elsewhere within Sony. We don't know specifically where they're moving to, but it's supposedly other teams within Sony to work on other projects and elsewhere within Sony Interactive Entertainment. There's a new team that's been formed that's supposedly, I think it's supposed to be like an entire new studio technically under Sony. And they're going to continue work on this kind of incubator project codenamed Gummy Bears that Bungie was working on. I don't know if this is the MOBA that they were apparently working on, why they were working on a MOBA, I don't know. Um, but I'm sure I read there's about 40 people or so moving across to that. And that leaves everybody else in the studio working on content for Destiny 2, as well as working on Marathon. So Bungie will effectively be absorbed into Sony. They will become part of PlayStation Studios. They won't have the kind of autonomy that they would have expected to have before, and that's because they've missed the sales targets again. Um, Supposedly every major expansion, every major annual expansion that's happened for Destiny 2 is just sort of less and less, each one after the other. And the final shape, despite being critically and commercially successful, um, and having brought a few people back, myself included, apparently sold less than Lightfall, which I was quite surprised about. And so from what we do know from what Jason Schreier and Jeff Grubb have said, is that these expansion packs, as we know them, effectively just won't happen anymore. And that future content for Destiny 2 are going to be in these content packs that are smaller in scope. And the final shape is largely the last expansion of that kind and of that size that we will maybe ever see again in Destiny. We've already seen seasons kind of downgraded to these episodes or echoes where, I mean, essentially to me, there were always just ways to just reduce the amount of content that they're putting out. They're essentially seasons, but just 3 times a year instead of 4 times a year, and maybe with less stuff. From what I understand, they haven't been received particularly well. I wouldn't really know myself because I did play a bit of the first one, or the first act of the first episode or something. Um, but I kind of stopped after that. I generally stopped after I was kind of done with Final Shape content, and I haven't been back to Destiny since then. And I would imagine lots of people are in the same kind of boat. I saw Paul Tassi talking about how this is one of the worst kind of drop-off rates that Destiny 2 has had since the Final Shape released. Um, and it does serve as a good ending point. Obviously, it's the end to their light and dark saga thing or whatever, right? So it kind of makes sense as a as a finishing point, especially as a player. There's obviously a huge sense of finality to this expansion, so it kind of makes sense. I mean, the final shape was received relatively well. Lightfall was, super disappointing for many people. I didn't buy it, um, but the final shape had some critical and commercial success. The critics really liked it. However, that wasn't enough, and we know the final shape made, or we know now supposedly that the final shape made less money than Lightfall. Um, and I think that's just a real shame because their backs were against the wall and they actually kind of delivered. I came back to Destiny after hiatus when the Witch Queen came out, and I enjoyed it. But the kind of discourse around Lightfall really put me off staying around with Destiny at that time. I thought I would skip that one. I saw so much content about how bad the story was. In particular, I remember watching that video that I Hate Everything put up and others, and it did. I mean, the story did look awful. I've never particularly rated the narrative in Destiny. I think generally its storytelling, I, I mean, it isn't great. At times, it's fine. The Witch Queen was okay. Definitely a big improvement. And I know that's kind of heresy to some people because people really love that expansion and fine. And if you do, that's fair enough. I get that. But there's been some real kind of low points of storytelling in Destiny throughout the whole franchise, across its expansions and its main games. Um, that's a whole separate conversation, really. But I think there's um, if something like the Witch Queen comes out and all you have to compare it to is like Curse of Osiris or something or whatever or Shadowkeep, like obviously it's going to look really really good, but even so, in its own right, it was decent enough, absolutely, and I did enjoy it. I did really enjoy the Witch Queen, and that did bring me back, and that made me hopeful um, for the franchise. And Lightfall kind of took that away, but I was pulled back in by the final shape, and honestly, it was shockingly good. Like it was shockingly decent. I played Destiny since the beginning, since the alpha, and I honestly couldn't believe how solid the final shape was. Um, and that did suddenly feel like a good time to be a Destiny fan again. There was a weird sense to it though, because it's not like it's like you come back to the franchise and it's almost, well, it was a serious high, but then it's also an ending point really. And I think everything that's happened in the last few days has really kind of solidified that for me and made me feel more comfortable with accepting that that's probably it for Destiny, for me at least. Because not even just for Destiny 2 going forward, I don't know what's happening with the franchise. Generally, in the future, I think a lot of people, myself included, expected there to be some kind of Destiny 3. Um, but that's not happening, apparently. So apparently, there never really was a Destiny 3 happening or in development at all. They were teasing this Frontiers thing that they put at the end of this Vidoc a few weeks ago. Um, but it was, there was the Destiny 2 logo was there, so it was suggesting that perhaps it wouldn't actually be, this isn't like a Destiny 3. This is maybe the next big annual expansion or something that they're going to do, which we know now apparently isn't happening because they're moving away from annual expansions. They're just doing a drip feed of content packs or something or whatever they're going to do per year. And then there was this rumor about this codename Payback thing, this project's Payback, which I think a lot of people were also assuming was going to be some kind of Destiny 3. I think apparently it was supposed to have been headed by Luke Smith, who apparently has now left the company. And this Payback thing isn't happening. But it wasn't even a Destiny 3 or some kind of equivalent to that anyway. I certainly was expecting it to be so, or some kind of big follow up to D2. But no, this Payback project was apparently a spin off third person shooter inspired by Genshin Impact. I don't know. I don't know. And I think this is where the problem lies, right? Which is like who are making these decisions? Who is this in management that's deciding that this is the best course of action? And I know the perspective that I have, that you may have, is that we're just fans, right? But the idea to me that you wouldn't then pivot to a big Destiny 3 style follow up to capitalize on the renewed interest from the final shape is honestly bizarre. Um, the final shape serves a decent ending to the Light and Dark saga. It seemed as a and did generate a renewed interest in the franchise, I think, and it was the critical high point as well of the series. It seems like the perfect time to kind of pivot to a Destiny 3 and serve as that kind, to kind of cap off D2 and everything that's come before with the final shape, and then move on to fresh slates with that kind of renewed interest and critical interest into a Destiny 3 or some sort of revamped, rebooted version of the game. But a third-person spin-off inspired by Genshin Impact is not what I would have expected. It's just kind of hilarious, and an awful decision in my opinion. And apparently it was cancelled a couple months ago, so that's not happening now. It was supposed to be this more co-op focused game where you're fighting monsters and solving puzzles or something, and set in the Destiny universe. Um, and Bungie are also apparently looking at other stuff as well. They're apparently looking at remakes of stuff, as well. Which I mean, I don't know how that would work, because I don't know if that would mean remaking Halo or what. But they're also apparently looking at developing mobile versions of Destiny, of course. It seems to me that Bungie really just does not know what they are doing. I mean, Sony paid $3.6 billion for Bungie a couple of years ago. That's crazy. Obviously, they wanted an ROI, as you would, and that's not happening. When the first round of layoffs happened, after Sony bought them in late 2023, I think it was in October, about 100 employees were laid off. Apparently, at that time, Parsons had told the company that they had missed sales targets by about 43%. I mean, that's a huge gap. And if the annual expansions are doing worse year on year as well, um, I mean, what do you even say about this? What do you even say about this, other than the fact that it's just all so clearly incredibly mismanaged? Um, and now they seem to just be focused, I guess, on life support essentially for Destiny 2, because the content it's going to get is not going to be what we've had before. It's going to be less. I don't know if they're going to pivot now as well from this kind of 3 season a year thing that they're doing with the episodes or whatever. It might end up being even less, and then these kind of content pack things that aren't really an annual expansion or whatever. Who knows what that's going to be like? Um, all of that stuff for D2. And then also Marathon, which is another bizarre thing, which is apparently this, extraction shooter, hero based as well. Apparently, it didn't used to be a hero based shooter, um, but they got the guy that was like one of the head designers on Valorant, and he came in, and then things decided they decided that they wanted to change into a hero shooter. They had some Tarkov players testing it, and apparently they weren't very interested. um, so who knows how that's going to work out? But that seems to be like it, right? Basically, like that's the lifeline. Like if Marathon doesn't do well, like I mean, I would say what happens to Bungie, they essentially cease to exist and they'll just be absorbed completely by Sony. But that's already happening now. That's already happening now. They're just going to become another one of the studios under PlayStation Studios. Um, and I mean, honestly, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of in two minds about it because it's sad. It's actually kind of sad because it's a studio, as I said, I grew up with. Um, but maybe this is the best thing for them. I I'm trying to think of the positives here, but there's definitely obviously talented people at Bungie. Um, and when they can and they're given the opportunity to, maybe that's under probably stressful, pressured conditions. But they do produce things like the Witch Queen and the Final Shape or Forsaken. Um, So, it's a shame that talent is essentially being wasted by really poor management. Um, and I don't put the blame just entirely at Parsons either, because I'm sure there's a whole load of them. It can't just be him making these bad decisions. I do absolutely think, though, that it's insane that you've got Bungie employees literally calling, and ex-employees now, calling for Parsons to go, like on Twitter. And I think he should, honestly. And it really doesn't look bad when he's making the blog post announcing all these people that they're firing, uh, for it to then be revealed that he's spending $2 million bidding on classic cars. um, I'll just read this bit from the end of the Jason Schrier article that came up this evening. Um, he writes, fans have wondered if Bungie might one day start anew with a Destiny 3, but such a project has not been in development, according to the people familiar. Bungie is instead looking to create a smoother onboarding process for Destiny 2, such as a rebranding, to attract new players who might be turned off by a game that can now feel impenetrable to those unfamiliar with its ample proper nouns. Um, that's, nuts. They already tried that with the new light thing. It didn't work. It was terrible. And with the context of this now, who is going to want to even? If you were playing Destiny, during the final shape, are you still playing it now? Because there's been a big drop off. As I said, Paul Tassi, I think, said that it's been the biggest drop off since D2 came out. So I don't know who they're planning to attract, especially now it's public knowledge that the content is not going to be at the level that it previously was. Schreier goes on to say those left at Bungie will now have to make do with a smaller staff tied to schedules and a company that looks significantly different than it did 3 days ago. Longtime veterans Luke Smith and Mark Noseworthy exited this week, according to the people familiar, as did several other top leaders, leaving lingering questions about the future of decision making at Bungie. Bungie staff who lost their jobs are receiving packages that include at least 3 months of severance and health benefits, so the people familiar, but just like last year's layoffs, anyone who received stock from the Sony purchase that has not yet vested will watch it disappear. Another painful twist for the turbulent acquisition. Just what a total mess. Total mess. There's been several points in the past where I thought that the Bungie I grew up with and really admired was kind of dead, right? When they were bought by Activision, when they got their freedom from Activision, I was excited, but that kind of quickly faded away when they had all the Battle Pass stuff and the Eververse stuff and everything, and all of that continued, and the content being how it was. But I don't know. This really feels like it's kind of it, and not just for Bungie either, but for Destiny 2, which is a great shame because, as I said, I came back to the franchise with this expansion, and I was excited to see what they would do next. I was hoping this would be kind of an ending. I was expecting, a drop in content, going forward for D2, but hoping that they had the foresight to be working on a D3 of some kind in the background. I would have stuck with D2 probably for a bit as well. I would have come back every now and then if they're drip feeding some stuff, but they would say, we're working on that next big piece of Destiny content. But it seems there's essentially there's nothing on the horizon, basically, if you're a Destiny fan. And if you're a Bungie fan, the only thing you have to hold on to is a PvP extraction shooter. And who knows what happens if that doesn't work out? Grub was saying about how if it doesn't go the right way, things could kind of blow up. It's hard to see. There'll just be absorbed more, and there'll be more restructuring, and more people will lose their jobs basically if that doesn't work. And that being the last hope for Bungie and those people that work there is the result of the decisions of the management. Instead of focusing on Destiny 2 or having a more pragmatic approach to doing content for it, understanding that producing content like The Witch Queen or the final shape is where their priority should be instead of trying to quickly push out things like Lightfall. They are essentially banking on Marathon being this miracle savior for them, which is just this horrendous risk. Apparently, it's still planned for release in 2025. I would be surprised if it got delayed, because by the sounds of things, if it needed more time in the oven, it probably wouldn't get it, because they really need it to release and to go well. So who knows what that's going to look like. I mean, I'm someone who I prefer single player games. I like RPGs. I like narrative games. Destiny's a bit different though. But there certainly aren't too many PvP games that I play. I used to play Halo matchmaking a lot when I was younger. I still play Counter-Strike every now and then. But extraction shooters have never really appealed to me. I will, especially if it's free, I will give it a go. I will try Marathon for morbid curiosity, if nothing else. But yeah, I mean, certainly for Destiny, if you're a Destiny fan, today's not a great day. And I can't see myself playing Destiny ever again, really, to be honest. I was going to try and play some today and yesterday to try and get some kind of B-roll for this video, and I couldn't even bring myself to do it. I might just uninstall it, if I'm honest. Because what's the point? They're just it's just going to be drip fed nothing now, probably. Until a few years at least. I would imagine they want to get Marathon kind of up and running, and then if that does work out, they'll probably focus on that for a bit, and then maybe they'll return to Destiny. But the idea of there being this next big Destiny project in the works, it's not happening. They're just not ready to make a Destiny 3, and that's a real shame. But there we go, modern gaming. If you made it this far, thank you very much. This is my first video on YouTube. I wasn't planning on even necessarily doing a video on this, and this isn't necessarily how I kind of want my videos to be. However, I am just interested in the whole thing as a Bungie fan, as a Destiny fan. So I thought it was a good opportunity to kind of make a start. Going forward on this channel, there might be some more stuff like this, but I think it will mostly be kind of like semi-scripted or totally scripted kind of video essay type things. That's what I'm planning on doing. I just mentioned I'm into kind of more single player narrative games, so if you're a fan of CD Projekt Red, Bethesda, BioWare, Obsidian, Valve, the kind of games that you expect from those studios, stick around. I might have something for you, and I may do a proper kind of autopsy on Bungie, because I mean they're kind of they're not quite 6 feet under. The body's still warm, but it's getting colder by the minute. And the way this story has progressed as well, Schrier just put up his article this evening. I mean, who knows? There might be even more to come out over the next few days, the next few weeks. So yeah, but thank you for watching. If you did enjoy the video at all, please do leave a like. I would really, really appreciate it. And if you're interested in the kind of content I've just mentioned, and you're interested in Destiny or Bungie, which I may return to as well, please do consider subscribing, and thank you for watching.
The best thing about Bungie is, even though you have these crazy ideas, you know that they're going to get funneled into a game that's fun.
We're creating something completely new, and it's a scary place, but if it's not scary, then it's not going to be good.
We all have a ton of passion, and we all have just enough crazy to pull this off.
We've gone from continuing to make Halo games to doing something which certainly draws on our past experiences and plays to our strengths, but it's new and exciting. It's going to take on a life of its own.
We didn't even know how big Halo was going to get. How can anything be bigger than Halo? We'll find out.